The United States has vetoed a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the intense fighting in Gaza. While doing so, US said the veto was divorced from reality and would have only helped Hamas. The resolution was introduced after United Nations Security Council General Antonio Guterres invoked Article 99 of the UN Charter to bring the issue to the immediate attention of the Security Council. Now, despite United States increasing pressure on Israel to do more to protect Palestinian civilians, it for the second time became the only opposing vote on such a resolution. The United Kingdom, another permanent member, abstained from voting. Iran has warned of the threat of an uncontrollable explosion of the situation in West Asia after the United States vetoed the UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hossein Amir Abdollahian, the top diplomat of the Islamic Republic, also appealed for the immediate opening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt to enable humanitarian aid to be sent into the Gaza Strip. According to a Foreign Ministry statement, he told UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on a phone call that as long as America supports the crimes of the Zionist regime and the continuation of the war, there is a possibility of an uncontrollable explosion in the situation of the region. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said the country's migration intake needs to be wound back to a sustainable level. Prime Minister Albanese added that his government will release details of a landmark strategy to overhaul the system migration. A crackdown on abuses of Australia's intake of international students will also form part of the plan. Long reliance on immigration, Australia has embarked on an overhaul of its migration system to speed up the entry of highly skilled workers and smoothen the path to permanent residency. In October, the government pledged to address abuses of its visa system to crack down on human trafficking and other forms of organized crime. The National Security Advisors of the United States, South Korea and Japan met in Seoul. They called for a stronger international push to suppress North Korea's development of nuclear weapons and missiles. Washington, Seoul and Tokyo have also expressed concerns about a potential arms alignment between North Korea and Russia. This comes to add tensions on the Korean peninsula are at their highest in years, with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un accelerating the expansion of his nuclear missile program. The United States and its allies have responded by increasing their trilateral security cooperation and strengthening their combined military exercises. The United States, South Korea and Japan have agreed on new initiatives to respond to North Korea's threats in cyberspace, satellite launches and cryptocurrency abuses. The National Security Advisors of the United States, South Korea and Japan met in Seoul as Pyongyang warned that it would deploy more spy satellites. North Korean state media repeated its stance that Pyongyang is determined to launch more satellites soon. North Korea has called space development part of its right to defend itself. According to the South Korean National Security Advisor, Cho Tae-yong, the three countries have also exchanged ideas on Ukraine and West Asian issues. The United States has restricted imports from 3 more Chinese companies and forced labor practices involving Uyghur Muslims and other minorities in China. The latest addition brings the number of companies on the list to 30. The latest companies to face the US restrictions produce everything from sugar to network transformers to yarn. They will be added to the US's Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act entity list. This list restricts the import of goods tied to what the US government has characterized as an ongoing genocide of minorities in China's Xinjiang region. US officials believe Chinese authorities use forced labor of these minority groups for producing the goods. Now, Beijing has, however, denied any abuses. In what appeared to be the largest attack of its kind in recent memory, approximately 7 mortar rounds landed in the US Embassy compound in Baghdad during an attack. This is according to a US military official. The embassy attack marked the first time it had been fired on in more than a year, apparently widening the range of targets. Well, in recent weeks, dozens of military bases housing US forces have been attacked, increasing fears of a broadening regional conflict. The United States strongly condemned these attacks and called on Iraq to bring the perpetrators to justice. Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani warned that attacks on embassies undermine the country's security. He called on security forces to bring those responsible to justice. The European Union has now become the first continent to set clear rules for the use of artificial intelligence. The agreement between European Parliament and EU member states has been described as historic. World's first comprehensive laws to regulate AI have been agreed in a landmark deal. The agreement will govern artificial intelligence, social media, and search engines. This puts the EU ahead of the US, China, and the UK in the race to regulate artificial intelligence and to protect the public from risks. Now, according to sources, the deal does not have final approvals just yet, as it still needs to be voted on by 27 countries, and technical details still need to be finalized upon, so it's unclear when it will go to a vote. As arguments rage over the Partygate and the handling of the COVID crisis in the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been blamed of asking the government of letting the virus quote-unquote rip a bit. This as per a new diary extract disclosed to the COVID inquiry. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who was a chancellor in the Boris Johnson's government during COVID, is set to face interrogation next week. Now, this comes after former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the public's characterization of Partygate was far from the truth. The latest revelation comes on the heels of Sunak saying that the government should just let people die rather than impose a second national lockdown, an allegation denied by the leader, of course. India's National Investigative Agency is conducting multiple raids across the country, following reports of an Islamic State terror nexus allegedly operating in multiple states. The investigative body has raided 8 sites across Jammu and Kashmir in lieu of an IS terror funding case, along with 44 other locations in the states of Maharashtra and Karnataka. Well, the ongoing raids in Jammu and Kashmir are being conducted alongside India's Central Armed Police Forces. Residential places are being searched for hideouts being used by terror operatives. The NIA has also raided 44 other locations pan-India. Most of the raids are taking place in the state of Maharashtra. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has yet again emerged as the most popular leader in the world. Now, as per the US-based consultancy firm Morning Consult, the Prime Minister has retained his position with an approval rating of 76%. The Indian PM has been topping the list for the past few times. Now, according to the survey, 76% of the respondents approved of his way of leadership. Meanwhile, PM Modi also has the lowest disapproval rating on the list. Only 18% disapproved of it and 6% did not give any opinion. The Indian Prime Minister's approval rating is over 10 percentage points higher than the next top leader on the list. The Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and the President of the Swiss Confederation, Alain Berset, bagged the second and the third spots. Air quality in the Indian capital of New Delhi continues to be very poor. Farm fires and unfavorable weather conditions have thickened the smoky haze shrouding the city. Doctors are warning about aggravated breathing problems following the severe drop in air quality. The Air Quality Index, or the AQI, in New Delhi stands above 300. Now, the AQI measures daily air quality. It tells you how clean or polluted your air is. It also indicates the associated health risks. An AQI value of over 300 represents hazardous air quality. Air quality in New Delhi deteriorates every year ahead of winter season, when cold air traps pollutants from sources including vehicles, industries, and construction dust. At least 4 people were killed when a fire broke out in a hospital near Rome. Now, the fire forced the evacuation of the hospital's facility and its patients. Patients in the intensive care at the hospital in Tivoli were transferred immediately to other hospitals. Firefighters said in a statement that the blaze began late on Friday and was eventually brought under control. Video of the operation showed fire crews on ladders trying to reach upper floors of the hospital. Meanwhile, protesters at the COP28 climate talks in Dubai have called for a just climate transition that includes vulnerable communities. Genders and workers' rights were at the top of the protesters' demands. Demonstrations aimed at pressuring nations to move decisively to stop climate change. And this comes amid reports that OPEC's chief had urged its oil-producing members to reject any agreement that targets fossil fuels for a speedy phase-out. Activists and experts have warned that the world must reduce the use of fossil fuels that cause dangerous global warming.
The people in the proper don't care when even the president doesn't.
Azerbaijan has struck a deal with Armenia that prevents the threat of an Armenian veto spoiling its bid to host the COP29 talks. Azerbaijan appears set to win support for its bid from other nations at the COP28 talks in Dubai this week. With this, its capital of Baku is now tipped to host the next year's UN Climate Summit. The Azerbaijani bid needs to be backed by all countries in the UN's Eastern Europe Regional Group. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed support from most countries, including Russia. Earlier, Russia said it would veto any European Union country's bid to host the summit. Now, after the EU sanctioned Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine, the decision over who will take over from the current COP28 host has been in a geopolitical deadlock ever since. A top OPEC official has urged member countries to oppose any deal that target fossil fuels at COP28. Secretary General Haytham Al-Ghais said that producers should, quote-unquote, proactively reject any text or formula that targets energy. He urged OPEC members to reject calls to phase out fossil fuels, an agenda that remains on the COP28 table. Al-Ghais expressed his fear that the meeting could support this course of action. The de facto head of the OPEC, Saudi Arabia, said it will not support any ban on fossil fuels. Others like Iraq, Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates believe phasing out fossil fuels will put unwarranted pressure on their economies. Their opposition comes despite protests from environmental activists. It's a big win for Saudi Arabia. Its efforts to persuade foreign companies to operate their regional businesses out of the country are paying off. Northern Trust becomes the first major financial firm to set up its regional hub in Riyadh. This comes before new rules will forbid state agencies from conducting business with foreign firms, that is, that don't have regional offices in the kingdom. Northern Trust spokesperson said the company now expects significant growth. The spokesperson said, and I quote, "The establishment of our MENA region headquarters in Saudi Arabia reflects continued investment in infrastructure, capabilities and expertise in the region." Russian President Vladimir Putin will run again for presidency in March as he seeks to maintain his hold on power till 2030. But he faces a number of economic challenges in the wake of the Ukraine war. First up, Russia is likely to face major labor shortages thanks to the military mobilization and large migration of people. The labor shortage is acute in high-skilled areas, but this has pushed unemployment to a record low of 2.9%. Russia has done well to deal with the sanctions. Now, the gross domestic product, or the GDP, is set to grow 3.5% this year. That is up from 2.1% contraction in 2022. In the long term, however, the growth potential is likely to ease. Analysts forecast growth to slow to just 1.2% in 2024. Price rises are a sensitive issue for Russian farmers and consumers, and they are a key area of concern for the central bank. The credibility of Western sanctions on Russian oil has come under spotlight. Russian oil exports have returned to pre-war levels, generating around $11 billion through mysterious fleet and uncertain entities. A Bloomberg report indicated that the price cap on Russian oil has effectively failed. The West had imposed a $60 per barrel cap on Russian oil as part of the sanctions. Now, according to Russia's finance ministry data, net oil revenues almost doubled between April and October. But this has paradoxically profited dozens of shipping companies that are difficult to track. Over 45% of Russian oil was transported with the help of these quote-unquote shadow fleet.